Greetings to you all. We have completed the fifth chapter, and now we are going to start a new chapter in this class. I believe most of you are listening to the videos, but I know few of you are not. So I request you all to kindly go through the video and understand the chapter 5. It's one of the important lessons. You will be getting 7 marks from that. So please do go through the video and try to understand and also read the book. So what chapter are we going to start now? Is Unit 1. Why Unit 1? Because I heard that most of you are most of you have already started Unit 1 and you've been learning all by yourself. So I thought it would be better if we finish this and then move on to the next chapter. Okay. Unit 1. The name of the lesson is Electrostatics. So let's begin with understanding what the name of the chapter means. Electrostatics. It is a combination of two words. The first word is electro and the second word is statics. What does electro mean? When we hear the word electro, we'll immediately think of electricity. What does electricity involve? It involves charges. Flow of charge is called electricity. So electro, now remember that electro as a charge. So you just imagine electro as a charge. Static. What do you mean by the word static? Static refers to the state of rest. You have been hearing this word from your 6th standard, static equilibrium and so on. So whenever you say static, it means that the object is at rest. So electrostatic means the charge is at rest. So the study of stationary electric charge or field as opposed to the electric current is what we call it as electrostatics. So this is the meaning of the name of our lesson. So now, what are we going to learn in this chapter? So what are the things that we are going to cover? In this particular chapter, electrostatics, we will be learning about charge, force, and the field that is produced by the charge and the potential due to the charge. So here the force, field and potential due to this electrostatic charge is what we will be discussing about in this chapter. Okay. So before we could go more into the topic, we will have few more topics to brush up what we have learned earlier so that we will have a better understanding here in this. So electromagnetism is not a new word to you because we have studied an entire chapter about electromagnetic waves. So you know what is electromagnetism. These two words, electro and magnetism, are inseparable. They are together. What happens here is the force we experience in our everyday life are electromagnetic in nature. So why do we call it as electromagnetic in nature? Everything that we experience, any push or pull, the friction, any force that we come across in our day-to-day life are electromagnet in nature. Newton thought these forces are all independent forces, which means they do not depend on any other factor. But it was later on he himself understood that these are not independent forces except gravitational force. Gravitational force is an independent force, but the other forces like electric force, magnetic force, tension, friction, normal force, all these forces are electromagnetic forces. So why do we call it as electromagnetic forces? What actually happens here is this force happens within the atoms. So electromagnetic force goes to the atom level. For example, if we say tension, you are pulling a string and the string experiences a tension. So what you do, you pull it. So the atoms in your hands and the atoms in the string, they interact. And it is due to this electromagnetic interaction, what happens? You are experiencing that tension. And again, when we come to friction, friction is also considered as an electromagnetic force. Even in the case of a friction, what happens? The atoms in the object and the atoms in the surface, they interact. So the electromagnetic interaction between the atoms, which happens to produce the friction. And similarly, for the normal force, we have been learning about normal force in your 11th standard, the perpendicular force that acts opposite to that of the gravitational force. And even in this case, it is also an electromagnetic force. So what is electromagnetic force? It is an atomic level force, and it is the interaction between the atoms. Okay. Going back to the history of, when I say atom consists of charges. So we'll move on to the history. How did they discover all these charges? How did they know that positive charge and negative charge existed? Who found out? The word charge was initially unknown to so many people or to the entire world. It came into existence some millions of years ago. What happened is, in earlier days, people work with nature, and a glue-like substance that come out of the tree. You may be familiar with this. You might have seen it in many places, and it is called as amber. In earlier days, people used to make jewels with amber. So one such person was wearing an amber jewel, and that person interacted with an animal. So the animal's fur got rubbed on the amber. So what happened is, once this incident happened, when the amber was rubbed by the animal fur, a small dust and leaves got attracted towards the amber. So they started to wonder why this amber is suddenly attracting these leaves and this dust, that too especially right after rubbing on the animal fur. So this is where the concept of charges came. So they try to understand. So the amber possessing this property is called charged. So this charged factor is not only in the case of amber, it is also in many other materials. You will be seeing that. So something can be charged. How it can be charged? Or I can put it in other words. Initially, any object is neutral in state. It does not possess any charge. Or you can say it has equal number of positive charge and negative charge. But when you do some work on that object, what happens? It happens to gain or lose some charge. So if it gains charge, what happens? It will become a negatively charged object. If it loses some electrons, then it becomes a positively charged object. So this is how an object is getting charged. This charging process can happen in three ways. One is conduction, the other is induction, and the other one is friction. But in this chapter, we will be learning more about friction, and we are not going to learn much about conduction and induction. So, charged. How do we charge? Not just amber and animal fur, there are many other ways to charge the object. One example here that we have is a silk cloth and a glass rod. So as you can see, initially they both are neutral. Once you rub the silk cloth on the glass rod, the glass rod loses some electrons to the silk cloth. So since it loses, this silk cloth gains electrons, so it becomes negatively charged. This has lost electrons, so this became positively charged. Similarly, animal fur and ebonite rod. Even in this case, what happens? This animal fur is losing some charge to the ebonite rod, so this becomes negatively charged and this becomes positively charged. And balloon and a wool. Wool is also nothing but a fur. So balloon and a fur. As here, balloon is negatively charged because it is gaining the electron, and this is losing the electron, so this is positively charged. And this is a very famous example which you would have played in your smaller classes. You will take a comb, rub it on your hair. When you rub it on your hair is losing some electrons to the comb, so your comb gets negatively charged. And what happens when you keep it near bits of paper? It tries to attract the bit of paper. So these are the ways by which you can charge a material by the process of friction. So what is friction? You are rubbing one material on the other and you are charging it. So this is what you call it as a process of charging or charge. Okay, now we know that there is charge. So how did they name it? In 18th century, Benjamin Franklin called one type of charge as positive charge and the other type of charge as negative charge. Because when I was talking about this, what does this positive charge and negative charge show us? It shows that when you bring two positive charge together, they repel. Or when you bring two negative charge together, they repel. When you bring a positive charge and negative charge together, they attract. So initially what they found was there are two unlike charges. Two opposite types of charges is what they learned. So there are two charges was understood initially, and later on what they did was they understood that like charges and unlike charges, they attract and repel each other. And then they named them as positive charge and negative charge. And you might have learnt about atom models. So even in the case of atom model, now we know that the atom is neutral. That's because they have equal number of positive charge and equal number of negative charge. But if an atom happens to lose one electron, that atom becomes a positive ion. If it gains one electron, it will become a negative ion. That means it is getting charged. Okay, now knowing that there is a process of charging by friction, what are triboelectric charging? Triboelectric charging means charging an object through rubbing is called triboelectric charging. So all the examples that I told you earlier, like silk cloth and wool, balloon and wool, ebonite and animal fur, all these are triboelectric charging. How many other materials are there? So here is a list of triboelectric series. So when it loses an electron, it becomes positively charged. When it gains an electron, it becomes negatively charged. So one person becomes a donor and the other person becomes an acceptor, and so they are able to mutually charge each other. So this series, or these are the list of materials that are triboelectric series, or you can say they are able to be charged. So now knowing that there are two types of charges, positive charge and negative charge, we will learn some basic properties of charge. So when I say electric charge, this entire universe is made of charges. Because everything is made of atoms, we are very familiar with that. When you break down atom into smaller pieces, it has protons, neutrons and electrons. They are nothing but charges. The electric charge is another fundamental property of particle. And the SI unit of this charge is coulomb. So we will use coulomb for electric charge. And the next one is conservation of charge. You have learnt about conservation of energy. Energy can neither be created nor be destroyed, but it can be transformed from one form to another. Same thing here. Charges can neither be created nor be destroyed, but it can be transformed from one object to another through the process of conduction, induction and friction. And the next one is quantization of charge. When I say charge, as I told you in the first point, everything in this universe is made of charge. So this, if you consider one object, for example, if you take a ball, that ball is made of charges. It has so many charges in it. But the number of charges in that particular ball will always be an integral multiple of the charge. Or I can say you will always have a whole number of charges. It could be 10,000 charges or 1 million charges or 10 million charges. It's not 10 million, 1.8 charge. So you will never have a decimal there. There is always an integral number of charge in an object. So if I consider Q to be the charge of a substance, N is the number of charge that are present in that particular substance. So N will be an integer, and what is E? The value of E is 1.6 into 10 to the power minus 19 coulomb. And this is a very familiar property of a charge. Like charge repel and unlike charge attract. So there is a force between the charges. So when I say there is a force between the charges, what will be the magnitude of this force? And how can I measure this force? And there comes in law called Coulomb's law to measure the amount of force between two charges. In your 11th standard, you've learnt about gravitational law. Gravitational law and Coulomb's law are quite the same. In both the cases, the force is directly proportional to the product of, in the case of a gravitational force, the force is directly proportional to the product of mass and inversely proportional to the square root of distance between them. Same here, if I consider two charges, Q1 and Q2 as given here, I'm going to consider Q1 and Q2 and they are separated by a distance C. If one is negative, both are negative charges, there will be a force of repulsion between them. How do I measure the repulsive force? It is by applying this formula. The repulsive force is directly proportional to the product of the charge and inversely proportional to the square of the distance between them. So whenever we have a proportionality sign, that proportionality sign will be replaced with the help of a constant, and that constant is K. And this constant we will call it as an electrostatic constant. Why do we put F12 and F21? I remember when we were learning in 11th standard and when we were learning about collision, the force on 1 due to 2, force on 2 due to 1. Similarly here, the force on object 1, the force on object 2. That is what this F12 indicates. As you can read it, F12 means the force of object 1 on 2. Here it is of 2 on 1. It's going to be the same here because Q1 and Q2 are equal. If I consider Q1 to be greater than Q2, then it will be quite different. Okay, now this is called as Coulomb's law. In Coulomb's law, the force is directly proportional to the product of the charge and inversely proportional to the square of the distance between them. And that is why we put F is equal to Q1 into Q2 divided by R square, where R square is the distance between them. So let's consider this as R for our understanding. What are the other things that Coulomb's law teaches? It is the force that exists between 2 point charges, and this force is inversely proportional to the square of the distance between them. They are directly proportional to the product of the magnitude of charge, and it acts along the line joining the 2 point charges. So this is very important. So it is a vector quantity. When I am talking about direction, then this force is a vector quantity. I have a charge here and a charge here. The force between them will act along the line joining the charges. So this Coulomb's law, the force is a vector quantity. So I can put this as an F vector. And what does that K, electrostatic constant, mean? It means a K is equal to 1 by 4 pi epsilon naught. We know what is 4 pi. Epsilon naught is called as the permittivity of free space, and it itself has a value that is 8.854 into 10 to the power minus 12. And the unit for the permittivity of free space is Coulomb square per Newton per meter square. Next, we are going to move on to the important aspects of Coulomb's law. So what are the things that we are going to learn from the Coulomb's law, the properties that we would be using for the further studies? Coulomb's law states that They are directly proportional to the magnitude of the charge and inversely proportional to the square of the distance between them. This is what we saw earlier. And what does the next point say? The charge on the the force on the charge Q2 exerted by Q1 always lie along the line joining the two charges. So we saw both these points when we were discussing about the law. So we'll move on to the next one. I told you about this also. What is K and what is epsilon naught? So we will have a value for this. The value of epsilon naught is what I told you earlier. So if I substitute the value for epsilon naught in K, that is 1 by 4 pi epsilon naught. If I substitute it here, then I will get a value for K. The value for K is 9 into 10 to the power 9 Newton meter square per coulomb square. Okay. Now what happens to the magnitude of the electromagnetic force between two charges of 1 coulomb separated by distance of 1 meter? That is, you are considering unit charges separated by a unit distance. So if I apply 1, we know what is the formula. We know that F is equal to K into Q1 Q2 by R square. So put Q1 is equal to 1, Q2 is equal to 1 and R1 square is equal to 1. So if you put 1 everywhere, your value will be 9.8. That is, this is the value for K, Q1, Q2, R square. So the force is 9 into 10 to the power 9. So moving on to the next topic, or the next important aspect of Coulomb's law. The SI unit of Coulomb's law in vacuum takes the form this. The fifth important aspect deals about Coulomb's law in vacuum and in a medium. So far, when we were talking about Coulomb's law, I told you that epsilon naught is the permittivity of free space or vacuum. So what will happen if we put this charge inside a medium? Only thing that changes is this epsilon. So initially it was epsilon naught, now it becomes epsilon, and you say this epsilon is the permittivity of a medium. This permittivity of a medium is always greater than that of the permittivity of free space. So if I consider air as my medium, the permittivity of air is 1. So what happens? The force changes for a same set of charge in different medium. Coulomb's law has some structure as Newton's law of gravity. I told you earlier, Coulomb's law and Newton's law are quite similar to each other. The next one deals with force F. You consider it this way, on and by. So if you have F1, 2, it is force on 1 by 2. If it is 2, 1, it is force on 2 by 1. Just remember it that way. So the force on a charge Q1 extended by a point charge Q2 is written as F12. And as you can see, you have a unit vector R21. This R21 is from F21 and F12 or in opposite direction, which means for every action there is an equal and opposite reaction, and this obeys the Newton's third law. Well, everything has an exception, and here Coulomb's law also has an exception. This Coulomb force is true only for point charges. Point charges means they are very small charges. So what happens if you take 2 point charges and they are very small in size, and the distance between them is also very small. Well, now we know that there is a charge. They've named it as positive charge and negative charge, and there are force existing between the charges, and that force can be measured with the help of Coulomb's law. And this Coulomb's law has certain aspects, and we've finished seeing all that. Now, so far we have been only talking about one charge or 2 charge. What will happen if more number of charges come into act? For example, okay, imagine I have a charge Q1 here, and here is another charge Q2. and we know that there is a force existing between Q1 and Q2 and they are separated by a distance r. I can calculate the force F12 as F is equal to Q1 Q2 by r square with a constant along with it K. What will happen if I bring another charge inside the picture? If I bring Q3 inside, what will happen? This Q3 will also exert some force on Q1. So let's consider this also is separated by a distance r. So this particular charge Q1 is experiencing two forces, one due to Q2 and the other due to Q3. So what is the total charge experienced by Q1? It is the sum of force due to Q2 and the force due to Q3. So see here, we have a charge Q1 and a charge Q2 and another charge Q3. So first we will calculate the charge force between Q1 and Q2. That is F12, which is nothing but 1 by 4 pi epsilon naught Q1 Q2 by R1 square. So the force on Q1 due to Q3 is F13. So what is the total force that is acting on it? Is F12 plus F13. If I have to consider another charge, say Q4 here, if I am considering another charge Q4 here, what happens? There is going to be another force acting on the charge Q1. So one more force F14 will also come into existence. So in order to calculate the total force, I will be adding F12, F13 and F14. So the more number of charge comes in, the more force is acting on one particular charge. So the total force acting on the charge is nothing but the sum of force due to each charge. So if I have to generalize it, if there are n number of charges, so what happens? We will simply put it in summation. So superposition is nothing but it is a property of force with which two charges interact or repel are not affected by the presence of the third charge. So the third charge is not affecting the force that is existing between these two. It is simply getting added up. So this superposition is explaining us how it is getting added up. The force on any charge due to the number of other charges is the vector sum of all the forces on the charge due to another charge. Okay, so we saw that there is some force existing between two charges, and that force can be calculated with the help of Coulomb's law. But how did this force happen? Both the charges Q1 and Q2 are far away from each other. They are not even in touch. I know that a force is nothing but a push or a pull. But there is no push or pull between them. There is so much of space between them. Then how did this force happen? What is the invisible thing that is bringing them together? Or what is the invisible thing that is the reason for this particular force? And that is called as field. So this charge has a field on its own. Every single charge has a field on its own. And it is because of this field, what happens? There is an attractive and repulsive forces. So this field is responsible for the force that is acting between the charges. So what actually happens here? For example, if I have a magnet, so what do we do? You take a magnet near a iron. What happens? That magnet will very easily attract the iron piece. Is there any contact between the magnet and the iron piece? No, they are not in physical contact. So we call this kind of force as non-contact force. And similar to that is our electric field. So they are not in contact, but they are felt. You have a magnet and you keep a nail. Imagine you have a magnet here and you keep a small iron piece here. It's not getting attracted. Now you move the iron piece here towards the magnet. What happens? Immediately it will get attracted. So why not here and why only here? That's because this magnet will have an electric field to a certain area. If you bring this object inside the electric field, then this object will feel the field and act accordingly. So similarly, every charge has an electric field. Every charge has an electric field, and this electric field is experienced once a charge or another charge, either it could be a similar charge or a positive charge. If that charge comes inside the field, then it is experienced and influenced by the field. So whenever I say electric field, so now this electric field should also be calculated. Similarly, how we calculated the force, the field should also be calculated. So let's go in the reverse way. This force is equal to Q into ER, where E is the electric field and Q is the charge. We are going to calculate for a single charge now. So if I know what is F. So F I can calculate with the help of Coulomb's law. And Q, I know it is the magnitude of the charge, and this is what I want. So how can I rewrite it? I can rewrite it as F by Q is equal to E. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to substitute it. What is F? I know the formula for F. F is equal to 1 by 4 pi epsilon naught Q1 Q2 by R square divided by Q. Q and Q gets cancelled and I get a formula for my electric field. So this is my formula for electric field due to a charge Q and Q minus. So similar to that of Coulomb's law, this electric field also has some aspects and it's very, very easy to understand. As you can see here, the lines in the positive charge goes outwards, whereas the lines in the negative charge comes towards it. So each charge has a unique field. This field points outwards. For every positive charge, its electric field points outwards. For in the case of a negative charge, the electric field points inwards. Now, let's consider I have a charge Q1 and I'm going to consider a point P here. And this point P will have an electric field due to the charge Q1. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to place another charge Q2 in that particular point. That point E already had an electric field due to this charge. Now what I'm placing is another charge in that place. So what happens? This electric field at a point E is equal to F by Q1. What does this Q2 have to do on this? Q2 does nothing here. So the influence of Q2 in the electric field is nothing. It is this test charge that influences, or this test charge is responsible for the entire electric field. Electric field depends only on the source charge. It does not depend upon the test charge. Sorry, this is our source charge and this is our test charge. Electric field depends only upon the source charge and not on the test charge. As we know, this electric field is inversely proportional to the distance. When I was talking to you about magnet, I told you that magnet has a field to a certain distance around it. So similarly, this charge, if I have a charge here, this charge will have a field only to a certain distance. So if I'm trying to measure the electric field here, it will be say some 10. If I measure the electric field here, it is 12. If I measure the electric field here, it becomes 2 or 3, and here the electric field becomes 0. The electric field is inversely proportional to the distance. The farther you go, the lower your electric field becomes. The test charge Q2 which we consider is always considered sufficiently small, a very, very small amount of charge. And if I have more number of charge, or if I have more continuous charges, I simply integrate it. Integrating is nothing but summing up everything. We have two types of electric fields, uniform electric field and a non-uniform electric field. Uniform electric field will have the same direction and constant magnitude at all points, whereas the non-uniform electric field does not. In non-uniform electric field, it will have different direction or different magnitude, or it could have both. See, when I say direction, magnitude, it's more like your speed and direction. So it could, even if one changes, we say it is a vector quantity. Velocity. It's more like when you are talking about velocity, in velocity you will consider both the direction and the magnitude. But when you're talking about speed, you talk about only the magnitude, because one is a scalar quantity and the other is a vector quantity. Here this electric field is a vector quantity, so we will be considering both magnitude and direction. In the case of a uniform magnetic field, the magnitude is also same everywhere and the direction is also same everywhere. Here in the case of a non-uniform field, either one changes. If the magnitude changes, then again we will call it as a non-uniform field. If the direction changes, then we will call it as a non-uniform field. If both changes, again it is a non-uniform electric field. So there are two types of electric field, uniform field and a non-uniform electric field. The electric field has field lines. So this will be the last topic for today. So this electric field has field lines. It is very similar to that of the magnet. Magnet, when you keep two magnets together, they come in contact even without any push or pull happening between them. So we'll call that as a non-contact force. Magnetic force, field force is a non-contact force. Electric field force is also a non-contact force. And the field lines are also pretty similar to them. In the case of a magnet, the magnetic field line always travels from north pole to south pole. And in the case of a north pole, when there is a attractive force, the magnetic lines are different. When there is a repulsive force, the magnetic lines are different. So the very same thing can be applied to that of the electric field. Simple thing is, there you had a north pole and a south pole. Here we have a positive charge and a negative charge. The positive charge always acts as the north pole and the negative charge always acts as our south pole. It's very, very much similar to that of the magnetic field line. So in order to draw electric field lines, some set of rules are being followed. So we'll just see those rules and we'll finish it now. In the case of a positive charge, the field always points outward, and in the case of a negative charge, the field always points inward. What happens if I have an isolated charge? If I have only one charge, how long does this field go towards infinity? Depends upon the magnitude, how strong the charge is. If I have an isolated negative charge, the place from where the field starts, because this is where the field ends. So place where the field starts would be infinity based upon the strength of the charge. The electric field vector at a point in space is tangential to the electric field. As you can see here, this is your field line between a positive charge and a negative charge. You are taking a point P. At this point, the electric field vector acts tangentially to the electric field. More magnitude, you will have more number of field lines, and less magnitude, you will have less number of field lines. In the case of a magnet, we don't have intersection of field lines, but here the intersection of field lines can happen. No two electric field lines intersect each other. If two lines cross a particular point, then there will be two different field lines vector at the same point. So what happens here is the number of field lines is directly proportional to the magnitude of the charge. The more the magnitude, the more the number of field lines that we have. So we'll stop with this. So what are the things that we've seen so far? We saw about electromagnetism, what is electrostatic, We learnt about the history and the properties of charges. Then we discussed about Coulomb's law, aspects of Coulomb's law, superposition principle, electric field, field lines, and the properties of the electric field lines. So children, kindly go through the video. Don't waste your time. Use it well. And God be with you. Thank you.